Hi Mikkel.
Hi Brian.
So today we're going to talk about the SaaS shift, which is a thing we've coined, which is all about hardware companies trying to become software companies, you could say. Trying to add on software as a new product line, a way to earn money, of course. And we're going to talk about why it's difficult and some of the pitfalls involved in it, but also how to get it right. And let's be honest, we're not software developers, any of us, so we're not going to think so much about the product side, but more about the go-to-market side. What's different? How do you actually do it? So with that in mind, maybe let's start on simply talking a little bit about why it's interesting, because this sounds like a niche topic, but I actually think that every hardware company out there is thinking about how can I do more software. So why is it so interesting?
First and foremost, I think it's for hardware companies, it's a way to earn more money. And what does that mean? Well, software comes typically at a higher margin, right? So it's a different margin game. It typically in the current world as well comes as a subscription. So the predictability and recurring, it's a repeatable and recurring revenue. It's typically also maybe tapping into new budgets so you can expand the market actually. So much more, typically more sticky revenue, more high margin revenue, and maybe you're tapping into entirely new budgets or markets. So it's at the face of it, something that is extremely appealing for hardware companies that are typically also a little bit more low margin, unless you're Apple, of course, but most hardware companies operate at a much lower margin than software companies. So a lot of hardware companies are looking at this pot of gold at the end of this rainbow and thinking, let's capture it, right?
Yeah.
We're already selling stuff to some of these customers.
Easy peasy.
Maybe have a bit of data. That's one of the questions.
Yeah.
Let's monetize. Let's build a software overlay. Let's build a totally new software line, whatever. Earn a buckloads of money. Easy peasy, right?
Very relatable, I can say, having worked in a hardware company, right? Because you actually look into next month and there's nothing, right? Because every sale is a new sale and your whole business feels very non-sticky. Actually, it's quite sticky, but it feels very unsticky. And then you look at these software companies that are on yearly contracts, just kind of auto-renewing. So you feel envious, right?
Exactly. There's also a second dimension to it, which is valuation. I think for some hardware companies, the multiples you get on a software company is way higher compared to hardware. So you can also try to reframe the whole identity as a company to become a software company and hence unlock higher valuation multiples. But not always relevant, but also something to keep in mind.
I would think there's kind of a general thing where hardware companies are generally valued on a multiple of EBITDA, where software companies, at least for a long time, were valued on a multiple of ARR.
Exactly.
Totally different business model, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so it's valuable, but I think we also recognize that it's hard. Like there's not a ton of success stories of this happening.
There's a big graveyard as well.
There's a big graveyard. So what's in that graveyard? Why does it go wrong?
Sort of putting aside the whole product development piece, which of course is a totally different paradigm compared to developing hardware. And we know a lot of hardware native companies find it extremely difficult to develop, maintain, and optimize software products.
You could say the Nokia angle in a way. Right?
Let's leave that aside, and then we look at the go-to-market piece. And why is the go-to-market piece interesting? I think first of all, it's a bit more of a black box. It's not there's not been done a lot of research in this space, and it's my experience from the field is it's also a bit undervalued how much it actually means to get the go-to-market piece right. So that's what we're gonna, I think, put the focus on, and that's the paper we've written is also focusing on that topic. And the question is, why is this difficult? And it starts with why is it different, right? What you'll experience as a hardware company is that while you maybe been used to selling again one-off sort of hardware orders, now you suddenly need to maybe address totally new buyers, so new people inside the companies. It might be the same company buying from you, but it might you might need to interface with IT or sustainability department or even higher in the customer's organization, analytics and whatnot. So typically new buyers. Also, maybe different budget pools. You're maybe moving from a capex type of buying environment to an opex, and that alone changes a lot of things. How do you fund this? Where do you get the money from? Buying processes also look quite differently because it's a different type of investment from a buyer perspective. When you're investing in software, you need to think about integration, you need to think about security, you need to think about adoption. So the buying process looks quite differently as well. And then of course the value proposition that you are selling is based on is very different typically from software to hardware, where most hardware companies emphasize stuff like quality, reliability, performance as intended and whatnot, where software brings about a total new suite of value drivers. And that is, of course, in a way, it's a good thing, but also a challenge for the go-to-market organization because they need to think in totally new ways, right?
I remember at least like with the value proposition, right? Hardware, at the end of the day, it boils down to something around features and stuff like that, and you can touch it and you can see it, and you can, even without deep knowledge of the category, you can have some opinions about is this a good or bad solution, right? And you can even demo it quite easily, right? Where software, it typically actually does something that maybe you're not even doing today, right? So it's often creating totally new jobs to be done out in the buying company, right? That's totally different, right? Messaging starts in a completely different way.
Exactly. So there's a lot of things that are different, but I think one of the first things you need to consider is what is actually your software play, because there's a very big difference between augmenting a physical product with a sort of a slim layer of software. It might be that you have a hardware product that collects data or some sort of that. And then on top of that, you layer a small subscription fee to get access to that data being displayed in some sort of dashboard or whatnot.
Yeah.
From building a standalone business, pure play software play within a hardware native company. So, right, a lot of models in between those two extremes, but standalone business versus a small software only, two very different scenarios. And the further away you get away from the hardware, the more business building you're doing, the bigger the lift, I would say. And we can talk about what does big lift include, but of course, the bigger the change and the bigger the need for change as well, in your whole go-to-market stack. So I think there's also a key thing here is to understand how do I actually, how serious and extreme is our software play, and how do we then set up the right go-to-market system to realize that ambition, right? And then I think I had a really good. We have a couple of external experts also interviewed as part of this paper, and one of them said in a really clear and crisp way is that you need to believe that this software play can potentially, within a sort of meaningful timeline, turn into a sort of a 10% revenue stream, right? 10% of your total revenue. If not, it's gonna get sort of strangulated in the existing system because the whole company, from supply chain, product development, go-to-market, incentives, all these things are set up as a hardware company, to even how you report to the board. Okay. And if you don't get to a 10% revenue or cannot get to a 10% revenue share within a meaningful timeline, maybe it's easier not to do it because it's going to get strangulated. Yes. So yeah, it needs to be meaningful. It needs to be something sizable, and then there's something about figuring out what is our software play. And I think to not downplay how insanely hard getting to 10% is, right? Because it's that, I mean, of course, there's lots of bad business plans and business cases in the graveyard, but I think that's part of it, right? Not underestimating the size of this task, and to your point, realizing that some of the pitfalls and some of the, let's say, drawbacks you're going to get are from your own organization. I had this experience that earlier where, you think in the beginning everything is cool and we're doing software, it's really great, guys. And in the beginning everyone enjoys it until you start siphoning resources and you start talking about software, and then the existing organization, almost like an organism, starts to fight you in a way, right? The immune system kicks back, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think that's extremely important to keep in mind. And I think exactly to that sort of the legacy of the hardware business. Why is this a distinct exercise? It's very different from a native software company launching yet another software piece.
Yeah.
The distinct exercise of being a native hardware company, layering on top some sort of software business is a very specific exercise, because the legacy that immune system is really gonna kick in, and you need to be very considerate on how you handle that in the best possible way. And that's one of the biggest, at the most basic level, one of the biggest pitfalls that we've seen is simply underestimating the lift of getting something like this off the ground.
Yeah.
What does underestimation mean? Underestimation means that you expect the existing go-to-market system to just start selling this.
Yes.
Now you're selling the software, the same customers typically. Today, selling hardware. Now you're just gonna start selling software. It's just another line in your.
It's another SKU.
It's another SKU, right? Also in terms of resources, right? You're just gonna do some sort of fairy tale business case, and everything is gonna be jolly, right? And you underestimate the level of investment, simply the level of investment needed to get this off the ground. You also overestimate probably how fast it's gonna go, and then you're gonna create again some sort of fairy tale business case where you expect way too much revenue and upside in the beginning, which is typically not materializing because it's a heavy lift. So and that's one of the biggest pitfalls, simply being too naive about this exercise. And then what happens when you are too naive is that you're gonna deem it a failure too early, and then you're actually never gonna see what it could have been. Right?
Yes.
And that's, I think, the very first realization, especially as a leadership team, you need to face is be realistic about these things, be realistic about the scope, the investment needed, the how much revenue this is gonna bring, and that's gonna be the first thing that you have to be realistic about for sure.
One of the things you write about in the paper is kind of relying on existing partners and sales. And Avadis has this experience of the value of separating it out, right? That having 10% of 20 sellers' time is not the same as having 100% of 2 sellers' time. Do you know what I mean, right?
Yes,
like there's so much value in separating out the sales task here, both on the partner and the direct side. Say, okay, you are focused on this. Because I think there's a huge pitfall in just kind of expecting everyone to, as you say, add another SKU to their portfolio when it's reality something completely different.
Yeah, it's not just another SKU. It's not just an updated new piece of metal, right? Everything around the solution changes. When you're selling and I think the paper is focused on recurring revenue, software as a service business, where again, you need to make recurring impact, right? Also different from hardware. You're selling one-off. The deal is the deal. Off you go to land the next deal. But here, the ticket price you get up front does not at all match the investment you made. So you need to make sure that the product keeps delivering value, and where you can capture some of that value through recurring revenue, right? That dynamic alone changes everything. Also when it comes to incentive model, for example, how you package and price your products, right? The value proposition as well, how you sell it, what you sell it on, who you sell it to, all these things changes. So really, it's not just another line item. It's almost like setting up a small mini company in the company. And then if you take the natural sort of implication of that, I totally agree with you, Brian, is I would never expect the existing go-to-market organization just to be able to master this. The marketing play, totally different. The sales play, totally different. And then again, this whole post-purchase interaction, where a lot of companies are setting up what is called customer success teams, for example, typically not something that's seen in the hardware team.
Yeah.
So the existing stack, marketing, sales, need to operate in a different way. And you probably need to build up totally new capabilities in order to make recurring impact and collect recurring revenue, which is key, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just a one-off deal, basically. Yeah. So I'm totally with you on that. Don't expect the existing system to be able to sell these things from the get-go. It might be in time, and that's a different story. But I would always carve out a specialized team, and the same goes for the partners actually as well. To your point, if it's a typically box moving hardware partner, they're never gonna sell this. And I think you said it before, Brian. Is like if your sales guys struggle selling this, your partner is gonna be 10x. Find it 10x more difficult. So never underestimate the burden or the barrier that you're putting up by taking too lightly on this. So it might be special sales force carved out, maybe someone with software experience, and of course the whole incentive model and skill set of everything that comes with selling software. And the same goes for the partner side. Maybe pinpointing and finding specific partners, and that you want to rely on to help sell and maybe even implement this software.
Yeah, and then it sounds like you had some reflections on, based on how different it is, you might actually have it as an additional external company governed in a completely different way. And then in some scenarios, you might actually want to have it a bit closer.
Yes.
Because it's actually more of an attach to a hardware sale. Like you wouldn't get the software sale unless you got the hardware sale.
Yes.
So it sounds like there's a bit of a classic consulting answer. It depends.
It really depends, and that's why I would be super, really put everything under the magnifying glass. It also, what we also typically see, for example, if you start to build a software product, typically based on some sort of physical product, maybe there's a sensor or something part of that physical product, is that you'll also get a lot of blended solutions where you're selling some sort of after-sales service agreement, and then you blend in software revenue as part of that holistic bundle. But it's not sold as a separate software play. So there is, of course, a lot of nuances on how to do it. But I think I just want to. My key point here is don't just expect the existing system to just fall in line and be the best path to success, because that's not at all given.
I think a quite dark reflection we had again where I was earlier, where we had this scenario was, hang on then, why are we even the right owner of this software company, right?
That's what a private equity would ask. Are we
exactly right? Are we then actually the right owner of this software product if our system actually doesn't provide it any benefits? It actually sometimes is just all drawbacks, right? And I think being honest with yourself about how to answer that question, like, are we the right owner of this thing? Of course, if it's something you bundle directly with the hardware and like some of the examples we're going to talk about, then it makes sense. But the further you get away, also to challenge yourself, say, are we even the right owner,
100%.
right? Or are we actually devaluing this company by owning it, right?
Or wasting a lot of money, right? I think what you probably have to look at is like, does the hardware business bring any direct value to the software business? Not in these vague terms like we know the customers. There is a distribution and access benefit or you can of course tap into. But I think one of the most obvious one is, are we generating the data that our software relies on to be useful?
Yes.
That is for me the most useful one. Here in Denmark, for example, we have a very successful company called Trackunit, for example, that actually grew out of developing and even producing sensors in the pure sense.
True hardware company.
Actually, true hardware company. And now it's more or less mostly a software company. They still, they don't produce them anymore, but they sell sensors because it's a key enabler of the software piece. But a lot of the value is actually generated by the software, and they can even use third-party sensors. So they really made that jump effectively to being a software company. But at the core of it is data, right? So instead of vague concepts about competence or anything like that, what are the hard things that you can benefit from in your hardware business that you can bring into the software business? I think that's probably to a large extent the pressure test. And then
makes sense. And I think maybe Trackunit is now a true Danish unicorn, right? So maybe what did they do right? What are some of the things they came away with and say, okay, we did this shift and it succeeded because of this, that, and the other?
Matthias, the chief customer officer, he was also part of the paper and has been interviewed. And a lot of the things he highlights is that a lot of the value comes from the data. And I think it actually started a bit coincidental. Like, hey, we're generating data.
Yeah.
Maybe we can help customers get more.
Makes sense.
Get more value out of that data.
Yeah.
And it ended up being actually where all the value is.
Yes.
And so that, I think it is key to understand that the data is really the most important piece also in how they generate value today. And then I think they were willing to reframe a little bit what the company is, right? Going away from an identity of designing and building hardware to having a fresh look at value pools and value creation for the customer, saying maybe a lot of the value is actually in the software, and they were right on that sense. And then they did a lot of things about rebranding the company early on to talk into these outcomes and all the value that's in the data, even before they were really extensively sort of. So they took, I think, a big bet in many ways, and to a large extent also succeeded. And then they've also been very deliberate about how they put together the whole go-to-market organization and the people that they hire in and how they're set up as a go-to-market organization. Yeah. It's very, very kin to what you would sort of a native software company would be. So that's also some of the things they've done.
So it sounds like they took the full step, right? The full SaaS shift in a way, right?
Yes.
And became a true software company.
They took a shift,
reframed the entire company.
Yes.
Which I think that of course requires all the courage and reframing and restructuring that you're talking about. Are there some examples as well of companies that kept being mostly a hardware business but added a meaningful software component? Because I think that's where most people are, right?
There's another Danish company called FOSS, which is a very specialized niche company. I think they have 3 or 4 billion in Danish in revenue, if I'm not wrong. So a pretty meaningful, sizable player in a specialized niche market, typical, B2B, deep B2B company. And they were also in the game of data. And what they did is they, on top of their sort of normal equipment business, they built a standalone software business and managed to get that, I think, as far as I understand, pretty high up. And Jakob, the former CEO of that software business, was also part of this. And I think they got to 8 or 10% of revenue or something like that. And then they actually brought it into the main business now. So now it's part of the wider bundle. And now they're selling solutions where the software is a sub part of that. And that has also been both a successful incubation of the software business outside the hardware business, but also a successful sort of where they have carved it back in, so to say, and reframed what they actually do now. So it was a stepwise process, but it has worked out quite well so far. It's still mostly a quote-unquote hardware company, but in reality now they're selling blended solutions.
Yes.
So there's a lot of, I think, good stories out there. There's also a lot of, the graveyard is also very big here, right? And I think we also need to pay respect to that. And what are some of the things that some of these companies have missed out on? I think, again, coming back to the fact that they took way too lightly on this. They read some sort of report or got some consultant to sort of
you should do software. It's
fancy,
recurring.
The future is software. Here's a fancy big number. Let's just do it. And then they took way too lightly on actually building that business. It is effectively like building a new business. And everyone who's tried to build a business know how fucking hard it is. So that's a big part of it. But I think if you were to look at, okay, but how did you then actually succeed? I think there is a couple of imperatives that are important to keep in mind. And one of the things I would personally, I also advise people to do this, is to start small and focused. So never ever go out with a very diluted proposition, multiple use cases, trying to go after the whole market and see whatever lands in the net. So I would invest smartly in terms of delivering on a few use cases, do it well, be pretty clear about segmentation. It's not the right thing for all customers of your sort of typical hardware customer base. So carve out a specific segment where you feel like here we can get traction. Use external data points to qualify that, of course, and size it. And then grow into it. Keep adding use cases. getting your wins, getting your credentials in place, and then gradually expand from there instead of trying to build this very fluffy, unspecific software product that is for kind of everyone. I think that is
and of course that's what a normal software company would do, starting out, right? Starting out with a narrow use case, typically even a narrow geography.
Yes.
Even, right? And then really over-indexing on customers and being really close to them and figuring out what's the right mix between custom development and standardized and all of this stuff, right? So I think to some extent there's kind of a meta question of how much should I act like a software startup versus how to actually get value out of being in a monstrosity of a big company.
Yes. And that is probably, the answer is it depends. And the nuance is probably, it depends on your time scale as well. How do you look at it? I think ultimately, if the key concept of your software business is to build something that is totally unrelated to your hardware business, I'm not sure you're the best one to do it. And that's where that core premise I would challenge. So
and then you can be an owner, but it really needs to grow elsewhere.
Yeah, then you can even, why do they invest in that and deploy the money when they could, whatever. Yeah. But you're writing, and if there's no bridge between the two businesses, I would question that whole premise. But of course, if there is a bridge, you need to rely somewhat on your existing customers or existing sales force, maybe use them as lead generators instead of actual selling, but just picking up signals. So teach them to pick up signals that makes a potential customer a good fit for our software product, and then bring in some sort of overlay sales team from the software business to make the actual sale. Yeah. Find a way to blend in software products into more integrated service deals, for example, as well is also another way. So there's different ways to go to market and figuring out. I think again depends on the nature of the software product and the hardware product, and is it the same people buying it, or what are all these things, right? But map out what are the pathways for you to start realizing revenue and hopefully build a little bit on the access and the advantages you have from your hardware business. Yeah. Sorry, man.
Yeah, no, I think that's just, again, personal experience. I think but that was all it gave, right? It gave that the first conversation didn't start from zero. No. Because if you're a software company number 5,000, hotcompany.io, okay, it's very hard to get in contact with anyone. Where being part of a big company, you can typically at least have the first conversation. But everything from there is as it would be normally, right? So I think that's also back to being realistic about what can I actually get out of being in a big company, right? Doing this.
And that's to the point is probably a little bit more moderate than what you would expect, right? And that's where I can get out of PowerPoint mode, go out, test stuff, see how is the dynamic actually in the real world. Like literally when you're sitting in the room with the customer, how open are they to this due to the relationship with the hardware business? Is it totally new people in the room that you have to convince and keep saying to your hardware company, you don't know how to do software, or challenging the core premise and value proposition of your software? All these things, you need to get that experience very fast, I think, in order to understand how to find your road to a meaningful revenue, right? Because you need to balance this thing about having a bold ambition. If there's no bold ambition, it's going to be strangulated in this hardware company because it's simply too minuscule, to your point. Yeah. At some point, resources are going to get scarce, and then you look in the software business, which is 2% of the business, and who wins that fight? So you need to have some sort of bold ambition. You need to be able to show some sort of dent in the universe, right? But at the same time, you want to be realistic. So don't get ahead of yourself promising too much too early, because then they're going to flush the baby out with the bathwater too early, and it's never going to fly anyways, right? So that's the sort of fine balance that you need to get right. And then I would maybe a fine point to that piece is to reframe a little bit your sort of metrics, right? Hardware sales is very sort of pipeline sales. Yes. How much revenue have you realized, and that's sort of kind of it. With software, you have some sort of more leading indicators, maybe. So start to put the spotlight on those. User satisfactions. It can be active users. It can even be lead generation, whatever. start to lean into those to show traction that maybe does not translate into hard money from the get-go. But you get an idea about there's a leading indicator, there's a precursor of revenue traction, and we're starting to see an uptick in those. So measure those things as well to get out of this. How much are we selling? And
what's the bottom line impact? It's probably poor.
It's probably poor, and again, it's also a recurring thing. So, but what is great about software as software service is that it's coming back next year.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see this major uptick, and that the hardware mind cannot really comprehend that.
Not always. No. Back to there's a reason why they're valued differently.
Yeah.
Maybe last question that can be a bit difficult one, right? Is what about on the people level? Like, should I go out and hire a VP of sales from a hotshot software company to run this? Can I shift my own people, so to say, right? Can the CMO who did hardware for 20 years, can he or she also do software? Like, I think at some point it also becomes a people question, right? Do I have the right people on the ship to actually do this transition, or do I go out and pay the big bucks for a software VP of sales?
It depends, probably. I think my experience is, and this holds true probably 80% of the cases, right, is that it's very difficult for just a existing hardware organization to start selling this thing, especially if it's an independent sale, where you're selling it as a standalone item.
Yeah.
Creating a blended solution is a bit of a different game. But if you are selling an independent standalone software product, it's going to be very difficult for the hardware organization to succeed. You will probably have a lot of veteran hardware salespeople that are sort of totally programmed within the hardware logic and everything that comes with that. So in a lot of cases, I would say set up a dedicated software sales team is the way to go.
With people from the outside, sounds like.
With people from the outside. And then, then what you're sacrificing is, of course, this deep relationships, a bit of maybe understanding of customers and products and so on. So if you can start to build that within a dedicated software sales team, I think that is probably the way to go for most companies, I would say. The retraining piece is also a bit more difficult, I would say. Again, especially if you're thinking about veteran people, plus 30 years in the business. If you have a few quote-unquote young guns that are still moldable and are not set in their ways, there's also room to create a blended team where you retrain some of those. But I would not expect a veteran sales force, hardware sales force that are grown up in that system to be able to just quote unquote start selling software standalone products. No. So that's a big one. I think to the other point is it's also changing your organization. So you're probably, if you get to a meaningful traction, setting up a separate customer success team, which is kind of a sales team, but not really. So it's in the hardware world, people are probably more known to like, okay, we have support and then we have sales people, and customer success is something entirely different. Yeah. Some would say sits a bit in between. That's for another day. But so you will also see that the salespeople need to work in a new constellation around the customer, which is alien to them, and that is also a big change for veteran salespeople that are used to owning the customer, right, and be the sole point of contact.
Yes.
Suddenly, you will have more like a team-based selling motion.
Yes.
And that's also a big change. And software people are used to that dynamic, so it's not going to feel as big as a change for those people.
Yeah.
So if you're serious about it, I would almost always consider setting up a separate team. Then they can act like a bit of an overlay team, so like a SWAT team, right? I would still very much rely on the salespeople, the quote-unquote hardware salespeople, to generate leads, opportunities, but you would send in...
Get you in the room, basically.
Get you in the room, So there's different dynamics around it, but the actual sales process needs to be managed by a standalone sales team, I would say.
Yeah.
So,
Cool. I think that was some interesting reflections on the SaaS shift being both extremely tantalizing, I would say, interesting, but also the complexities of it and how hard it can be for hardware-based companies.
Yeah, and maybe just final note, Brian, because one of the things that, a lot of people are also incentive machines.
Yes.
And I think it's also important to keep that in mind. How is your incentive model set up to support this transition? And what we're seeing is, again, if you're just rewarded on year one revenue,
Yeah.
and software is not a year one revenue play, they're going to get so much more quota attainment from making that big hardware sale. So incentives is extremely important.
Yeah.
And I would also say on the pricing side, it's a new pricing dynamics. Pricing software versus pricing hardware. So
100%.
it just adds to the complexity to your point.
And I think we had a cool case, I think, in here, right? Working with a kind of in-betweener company, right? Where they just started measuring only on recurring revenue.
Yeah.
And that was a shock to the system, right? Because everyone's kind of pointing to the P&L at the same time and look at all these things going on. It's like, yes, but in software, it's ARR. That's the king, right? So if we don't generate new ARR, we're done.
Yes.
Right, and then so whatever we sold of servers and hardware and installation and so on, that's great, but it actually doesn't matter, right? And I think that's shock to the system. I think, and if you're doing that true transition, I think that's required.
Yes. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and we also talked about the organization dynamic, about setting up the business, maybe bringing that business back into the hardware business, and what does that mean for the identity of the company? Matthias and Trackunit talk a lot about the branding, actually. Also, like what is like the identity of this company being a important aspect of it, because they were ahead of the curve and they actually changed the whole positioning and branding profile of the company. Before it was fully a software company, but sort of the chicken and the hen. So Jakob also from FOSS also talked a lot about that, about saying, build and maybe even a separate identity around this company. And then you bring it in, then you need to change the identity of the former, of the big old mothership and all these things. So, yes, a lot of things to keep an eye on, Brian. I think we covered most of them. And the key takeaways, no easy feat. I think there's a lot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but also a lot of pitfalls. Yes. And that's just on the go-to-market side.
Makes sense. And we didn't even talk about the product, but that's for another day. So thank you, Mikkel, for a good discussion on the SaaS shift.
Yes.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any questions or requests, you can always contact us at info@kvadrant.dk. If you want to know more about Kvadrant Consulting, please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our newsletter, or go to our website kvadrant.dk.